How do you change your past? That's an interesting question, Jacqueline.
Yeah, it's like,
You got any
can you
thoughts on this
actually
one?
change your past? Can you, I mean, what the hell? The past is gone. How can you change it?
Well, I don't
Um,
think you can. You can't really go back in time unless you've got a time machine, a TARDIS. Do that sort of thing. But
I do have a time machine hidden here.
do you?
In the
Okay.
yes, in the garage, I have a secret time machine. No, I'm just kidding. I love to have a time machine. Actually, we're getting off track now.
Well,
I love to have a time machine to go back to certain historical events and rewrite the history books. And hey, guys, you've lied to us. But just also now, not only about that, but also to experience what it would be like in those times.
this is the reason you should have a lawyer in Los Angeles
Why?
because you can get things done yesterday.
Of course, I've heard that before, and I couldn't remember why. I must be
Yeah.
getting older now. Right, because I can get things done
Done
yesterday.
yesterday, yeah. Wake up today and it's
Um,
yesterday over there. Fantastic. Let's get this done.
yeah.
No, in
So
all
how?
seriousness, but this is
Okay.
a question around perspective, though, isn't it, Jacqueline? Because
Right. It is definitely it's going into the conversation of perspective, but before we go into perspective, I like to sort of share some epiphanies I had, so to speak, which is like a precursor to perspective. And I think for some people, also people who are sort of more, we obviously want to explain things and analyze and make sure that we're not just talking nonsense here and make stuff up. Um, but it helps for the people who are holding on to their logic for the most part. Not that this is wrong, but there are other ways of gaining knowledge as well. Being logical is one of them, or understanding, or so. Now, what I've learned is, and I'm sure you've learned that as well, that our brain and our memory is fallible. So, and the way it works, it's like, yay! I couldn't even remember the joke from the with the lawyer in Los Angeles talking about being fallible. What the hell? Anyway, um, so the way this works is with our memory. Let's say I'm going back to a memory where was celebrating my 8th birthday. That's a while back. So obviously I don't remember everything of it. But the way this goes is, let's say I'm 14 and I'm remembering my 8th birthday because it was such a wonderful day. And so it's like I'm opening a file folder. I pick out the memory of age 8 when I had my birthday. And I thought, oh, that was so nice, and all the friends, and I was wearing this yellow dress and my favorite dress. And then I put the folder back into my memory because I finished um, thinking about it. And all of a sudden, the dress that was yellow, suddenly turns green. I don't remember. And then I'm like 16 and I remember, oh, remember when I had my birthday when I was 8 years old and I was wearing this green dress and there were all these people and Auntie Mary was there and actually she wasn't there, but I thought I remember and I put it back into the folder. So the way it goes is that each time we access a memory in our sort of wherever the memory is, we access our memory, our brain stores this back a little bit faulty, a little bit different. So when I realized this and I thought, oh, interesting. Yeah, I can relate to this. We also know the stories of when people witness an accident. I mean, people might, have just different views on it because they were standing at different positions. But we also know that witness sort of memories can be faulty too. Someone sees a blue car, the other one sees a red car, and there could have only been one color. So somehow our memory and our brain is a little bit faulty. And I learned that our brain stores information not back exactly the same time, the same way we experienced it at the time. And we might have a different experience than someone else who would have observed my birthday party. Maybe my cousin would have thought, oh, what a horrible day, while I had the memory of, oh, this was the best day of my life. But anyway, so I thought, okay, if the brain is storing my information faulty, well, then I can change it, can't I? What's the difference? I can make a situation, just as an example, a situation that was maybe not a good day. I could say, okay, so maybe I just make it a positive day, just as an example, because my brain is storing it faulty anyway. So let's just inject something that's more helpful. Or I thought, okay, if I was hypothetically, let's say, a shy child, and I was sitting in the class and not really participating because I was afraid and shy. And that's my past and that's my memory. And I thought, well, maybe I can just change it and tell myself, well, I wasn't that shy little child. I was relatively confident. I was just a little bit quiet. And and so I thought, logically, what is the difference? If my brain, to some degree, remembers the information faulty, so why could I not change my past in a way that it's serving me better today?
So yeah, like it's very interesting, Jack, hearing you talk about that, because one of the things I'm very aware of is how our past is a major player in our future, and particularly when we talk about reactions, because our reactions are a reenactment of what we've done before. And it's interesting, if those files are corrupted, then here we are reacting what we think we did before, but is it? And do we as humans, we have the computing power to actually change that? Because we can look and go, okay, so I remember, I have a memory of being about 10 years old and being stuck on a cliff face. And I wasn't actually stuck there.
Right, right.
But I believed I was because I couldn't see where to put my foot next.
Oh, that,
Then a fright and I got frightened. So once I was in fight and flight, and because it burned into my memory. And so any situation like that triggers a response that says, well, hang on, this is dangerous. But that's not necessarily so. So going back to that cliff face as an adult, jeepers, it was hardly a cliff face. It was just a hill, you know. But we've told ourselves the story,
that's
right? And then it becomes what it is, not because that's actually what happened, but in fact it's because we've made a story up, and each time we've gone and visited that file, as you made the point, it's become slightly more corrupted.
yeah, that is, I mean, apart from your flight and fight situation, that is a really good example, because it does highlight the two things. There's one thing that the brain stores information somewhat faulty, it may delete or add information, and the other thing is, our perception and our experience at the time, when you were younger, and or it doesn't matter whether you're young or not. So these two things can really distort a particular experience.
Yes, so when it comes to talking about how we change our past, first we have to understand that our recollection of the past is not what it ought to be. Secondly, we can actually then change the way we think about
Mm.
that past event
Yeah, yeah,
and gain more perspective from it. And this is where things like, well, experience and education and knowledge, the more you can actually change your perspective because you've learned about a different perspective. you've learned, you've gone to university, or even to the University of Life. You've gone and found out that, you know what, just because we're told it's so in Australia doesn't mean it's so in China or
Mm,
in Bolivia or
mm,
in Chile or in Sudan. Like it, we all these are different perspectives of life.
yeah.
And the more perspectives that we can look at whatever issues are in front of us from, the greater our flexibility in solving the problem. And this is where I have to really like using the word have to, but it's so important that we actually get control of our own stories. We get control of our past and say, really, was that really correct? That perspective that I'm carrying around where my quick reaction is to be this or to do that. Is that really the truth? And there's a kind of peace that comes with that, Jacqueline. I don't have to be right. Give up on being right. It's like, okay,
Yeah. So why,
thank
I
God
mean,
for that.
why, drawing it back to I have to be right. Let's dig into that one because that may come a little bit left field for some of the listeners. And what does that mean? And why do we want to be right about things? And yeah, and what
Safe,
does it say?
safety. For me, if you ask me,
Mm,
well, why is it that I always have to be right and in command of the situation? It was a matter of safety for me that I knew where I stood
mm,
and I had a clear perspective on what was right and wrong, which made me quite dogmatic as a character.
mm.
Uh, but on the other hand, um, so long as I stayed within those boundaries, my child and the child, I suppose, felt safe because it was like, oh, well, that's the familiar boundaries.
That
Um,
makes sense. So we have this natural tendency as human beings, we want to be self, and that's fair enough. And we also like to hang on to perceptions, even though they may not be true. We like to hang on to them or cling on to them because it gives us this perceived feeling of safety in this situation.
and in
And
fact,
yeah,
and in
so
fact,
safe.
probably not as safe as what you would be if you had a much more open mind, because what you're deliberately doing is closing down your awareness.
That's right. That's right. And you're sort of deluding yourself with a sense of safety that is that is not necessarily true. And I mean, we know from the coaching perspective, we also train or teach our coachees to be okay with what is, to be with a certain situation without doing that delusional hanging on to something else that gives us safety.
Yeah, look, I think this is the thing here. How do you change your past? Well, firstly, you accept your past is not necessarily what you believe it to be. Second, you start getting comfortable with taking different perspectives and trying them on, kind of like you try a new jumper on, a new shirt or a new jacket. You can try this perspective on and go, does this work for me? Does this make me calmer? Does it make me more in command of my life, or does it stress me? Does it not something that I want to look into,
Mhm.
or a perspective that distresses me? And you can be like that, but we're seeing so much right now in America. We're seeing this huge divide of perspectives. I mean, the facts are the facts. What's happened has happened. Trump was elected, and then Biden was elected after him, and now all these stories. This divided nation that says, "Look, I'm going to have this is my perspective, and I am right." Well, okay, you might be. You might be. But the other side said, well, I am right. Well, you can't both be right. But
And
what if you could see from each other's perspective? Maybe you could come to that compromise.
that's right. And also with these type of perspectives from the observer situations, as in, the American voters, it's like they are presented with two options, and either option is, it's like you're in that perception. I can only option for this or that, but you also want to take a step back and kind of look at the overall situation, because I find when you're caught in this, let's say, game in quotation of I can only take this option or this option, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like caught being in a prison. And in this situation, I mean, I find it really interesting in this particular scenario with the upcoming elections in the US. And, we see this, we have listened to this debate between Biden and Trump. And you're caught in these two perceptions, and neither of them is, they're really just fighting and throwing things at themselves. And then there's this third person. I'm just throwing it in there like JFK Jr. This third person coming in, and it's almost like we have this thing in Germany where we say something along the lines of, if two people are fighting, the third one is laughing. And that's what I think about. The third one is laughing. I mean, I'm not, I'm not
Yeah.
imposing you or saying you should vote anyone. I'm not in the US, but I observe this, and then I see this third person coming in, laughing, as in benefiting. And I'm not saying he shouldn't benefit. Um, I'm just saying he comes in and he can benefit from this fight. I mean,
That's right.
and
Because
and
they're
it all
expending their
highlights
energies.
that we can be stuck in our perception, and as a observer also, you want to be careful. What is your perception? Do you already have a predefined belief? Do you favor one of the other? And can you change the past? Are you open to look at that certain events have happened, or there were
Mm.
there was more complexity involved than what was told to us? And that's about changing the past. Are you open to look at it? And that's the first step, being open to look at it. It doesn't mean that you actually take it on, like you said, trying on a new jacket. You try it on. Does it look like it good? Am I going to keep it? No, I'm not going to keep it, but I've actually tried it on.
Yeah.
And I think that's also, about changing your past. You want to be open to look at it. Is there a possibility that it would have been seen from a different perspective, and just giving you new additional information? Um, and and the thing I also notice about us human beings, I think, um, when, let's say, we've experienced a traumatic event, someone has done us wrong, whether it was, physical violence or anything, something, sort of dramatic, that someone has done us wrong. And when that has happened to us, we like to be heard, we like to share our story. And I think that is important as part of the process, also when we do coaching, as part of the process of sort of processing this situation. People want to be heard, and that's important. But then there's also the time when we hold on to that particular um, story and that particular event, and that it has happened in a particular way, and it keeps us in this victimhood position, which
Yeah.
is not helping us in the long term. And this is where it becomes hard, where people then say, but this has happened to me. And it's not about that it didn't happen or it's been denied. It's about what other perspective can you gain from this event that is actually empowering you to move forward. And some people have been through immense trauma, and there was this point in time where they said, I want to move on with life and I want to let it go. You know, you can't forget it like as it is in your memory, but let it go and move on. And I've heard some spectacular stories of some of my clients. I haven't even experienced this type of trauma, but where they came to this point, okay, it has happened. This is what happened at the time, and I'm moving on. And they created a new story
Mm.
that doesn't invalidate this particular event that actually happened. But with this event, they processed it in such a way that they created a new story, which, you know, is like they've changed, adapted the past in sort of some way or
Well,
form.
that's right. That's right. You make a really good point before, Jacqueline, about being in the problem. You up close. When we get really up close and we're intensely in it, then it's often very hard for us to see the bigger picture. So we have a sort of myopia around what we believe to be the case. But if we can step back and look at a bigger picture, then the rationale becomes more obvious, and the view becomes better, and you can say, well, okay, so this happened, and in up close it's ugly and horrible. But if I step back from that and say, okay, still ugly and horrible, but there were these other things around here, and if I want to get on with my life, then I need to forgive, not forget. And forgiveness, we talk about forgiveness as a way of being, and is not to say that what happened was okay or that it was acceptable in any way, shape, or form. And it is about simply saying, okay, I choose to move on from this. And so therefore I restore that relationship to what it is. And it is a choice. So when we talk about changing our past, particularly how it affects us in the future, we have to understand it's a choice. You don't have to live according to what you think.
And that is such a critical point, I find, to say that it is a choice, because this is a point. It's almost like it is a turning point when you choose. I want to move on. It is an empowering way of being, and even in the face of all the hardship that a person may have experienced at the time, choosing to move on is an empowering way of being.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it relates to our autonomy as a human being. We have a lot of autonomy, um, that where we can choose different ways of responding rather than just staying in this reactive victim mode. And when people get this, when this turning point has set in for people, it's like they've reached a whole new level in their way of being, a whole new level of empowerment, and they can use also that past experience to propel them forward and maybe go into a different direction.
And this is where, as I say, thank God I don't have to be right. Like I can relax because exactly that I can accept that what comes up for me in the moment may not necessarily be right. I don't have to justify that. I don't have to live by that. I can look at what's happening at the moment. Right here and now is the only reality. And I have flexibility around how I'm going to respond. I don't have to be a slave to my past. I can choose to say, well, I see it differently. And I do,
I mean,
very differently.
you've raised a very critical point. This sentence, thank God I don't have to be right. I mean, that's just brilliant. Because if you stay in this perception, this beingness of I'm being right, it's not about whether you are or not right. It's like I'm being right about this. And if you can let this go, you also receive a lot more energy, because holding on to this, it's like it takes a lot of energy to be right and to be right the next day and the next day. So I love the sentence, thank God I don't have to be right. I can let it
Mm.
go. And energy comes
And
back.
this is one of the great things about having a healthy relationship with vulnerability. I can put that out there and say, okay, well, whatever comes to me, I will make something of it. I'm not going to be hanging on to my security blanket. And the more energy I put into hanging on to being right, or that my memories are correct and that my past is what I believe it to be and that it's relevant to my future, the more I hang on to that, the less open I am to the now, the less space I have for computing what's going on right now.
This is such another amazing point. This, if you hang on to something, you hang on to the past and you're not in the present. You actually are taking away from being present right now. And this is where we lose also a lot of our focus, a lot of our energy, because we are hanging on to our past. It's sort of in our human nature, and we have these memories, but it's not letting us be present in the now. That's a big point.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because we're all human, right? And
Oh,
when we're triggered, the fight and flight comes in, and you're busy. Like just before we got on this call, I'm busy trying to find some information for a colleague who needs the information for a meeting tonight. And of course, I've got to record this podcast, and now I'm starting to get frantic because time is running out. Tick, 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 tick. And I can't find this document anywhere. But I get on the call, we're talking now and calming down into it and coming into the present and being here now. Magically, I remember where that document is.
that's
Like, is that just pure coincidence, or is it because I've become present to now and I've not put pressure on me to be doing 10 things at once or whatever? I'm just present to the now. Bang, I know where the document is. Problem
yeah,
solved.
yeah, yeah. It is. It is also this effect, like in some of the other sessions, podcasts, I spoke about this little toggles which we have in our brain. If we have, if we are emotional or under pressure as being emotional, we cannot think. It's like a toggle switch. If
Mm,
I'm emotional, I can't think too well. It's not that I
mm.
completely can't think, but my logical thinking is not working that well.
And it's
Eh,
important you acknowledge that, right?
yeah, yeah. And if I can let
Mm,
go of that, my brain is back in full working order. Um,
mm.
yeah, so yeah,
So that's
that's
just being human. Yay, good for
it's
us.
called being human. Yeah, yeah. It's not also for the listeners. It's not that we don't suffer from these sort of these experiences and these ways of being, but we know how to catch us very quickly. So we would
And that's
train
the trick,
that.
isn't it, Jack?
That's the trick.
That's the trick, to be able to see and be able to have the presence or awareness of self-awareness to know what's
That's
going on. Because it's
yeah,
not that it doesn't happen. Of course it happens. The only
yeah,
question is how quickly can you arrest
yeah,
that that
yeah, yeah,
that
and
being that's not helpful
yeah.
to what you want to achieve and bring it back on track.
And that's right, and especially with some of the sort of more bigger and major events in people's lives, where we, maybe have been through a divorce or some traumatic accident or these type of scenarios. These can hang with us for years
Oh
and
yeah.
impact us for years. And the
Mm.
question is, I mean, there is a process. We're not robots. So if I go through a divorce, that's not something I can just flick a switch like I've just done with this brain thing around emotions or thinking. No, we can't just flick a switch. It's a process, and we want to reflect and work it through and so forth. But then there is a time where we do want to switch on and move on with life. And for how long do you want this to be negatively impacting your current presence?
Mm. Mm.
Present.
And making the decision to want to move on, that's the starting place, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And look, I personally, I sometimes love these little mind games, as I sort of expressed at the start, where we understand the brain is not storing information 100% correctly, and each time you pull out the information of this particular event and experience again, it stores it, or each time it stores it back a little bit differently, a little bit. And I love the game of thinking, oh well, if that's what it does, why don't I just change that event if it didn't suit me? Not in
Yeah,
a
if the memory doesn't
delusional
work.
way. Yeah, but memory doesn't work in the first place, so why not
Hmm.
inject a little bit that's a little bit more helpful in the today? Now, I'm not talking about being delusional about things and in denial
No.
about certain things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about injecting a little bit of a different perspective into that particular event that's going to help me today.
Kind of
And
like a kaleidoscope, isn't it? Because like all the bits are there, right? But if you change the kaleidoscope, you change the view, but everything that's still there
it's still
was there
there.
before, still there, but you're just twisting it a little bit and saying, "Well, no, that's a different perspective." And if I, I one of the hardest events of my life was losing my sister to cancer 30 odd years ago.
Mm,
She was 31 years old, and you're like, "Well, what's that all about?" And I still don't know why. But what I did get to a point, and you experienced this with me, was to understand the impact of that on who I was being, and then realizing, hang on, I need to change this perspective. I need to actually change my relationship with what happened to my sister. And the
yeah,
power of doing that is monumental in my ability to function and be effective in the world today, an
mm,
event that happened 30 years ago.
yeah,
So I can't bring my sister back to life, but I can deal with the issues that are around it and change
yeah.
my perspective and how I feel about it and how I'm being about it. And then it becomes a power,
It
not a
does. I
problem.
mean, that's right. And also we do make certain decisions based on certain experiences, but these decisions, they may not serve us. They may not actually be conveying what the truth or reality of the matter is. And often we make decisions around us. Oh, it was my fault, or I could have done anything. And these decisions based on that experience stay with us, and they just run the rest of our lives until we come to a full stop and say, well, well, is that actually true? Is and it's an amazing shift. I mean, I saw that shift in you, and it's incredible what it's done and released for you in this particular
Yeah, I
scenario,
think
your sister.
we and I think this is what we're urging our listeners to do is to look and say, what is serving you from your past and what's not
Mm,
serving you? And if it's not
yeah,
serving you, then this is the part that you need to be looking at changing your perspective on,
yeah, that's
accepting that it may not even be true anyway, because of this faulty refiling that we do. And when we can make things worse as well as make things better. It's not just going from a green dress to a yellow dress and back to a blue dress. No, we can make these things terrifying. And so
that's
it's important that we look and go, is this serving us in the now? And if it's
mm,
not, then it's time to try and get a different perspective. How do you do that? Well,
mm,
firstly, you can get a coach who's going to look at things from outside of your head and ask you questions that are going to be challenging and change
mm,
the way, help you change to see that things can be
mm,
different,
mm, mm.
and then hold
Yeah,
you in an accountability structure that will actually enable you to make that kind of progress.
yeah,
It can
yeah,
happen. Even talking to a well-functioning adult about whatever it is, and you discover, hang on, that's just my perspective on that. That's not really
Yeah,
what happened. And maybe I just need to say, even if that is really what happened, I'm just going to leave it there and move on.
yeah, yeah. That's really good. So also the conclusion is, in that context, you can change your past.
In that context, you can change your past, and not only can you, but I would suggest that there'd be very few humans wandering around this planet who wouldn't benefit from laying down bits of their past and moving on and
Yeah,
looking at it from changing a different perspective and saying, well, look, I'm glad that happened to me because I now have a view of the world that I would not have had that not happened to me.
mm,
I have an
mm,
ability to empathize with people that I wouldn't have had an understanding of if that
mm,
hadn't happened.
mm, mm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, look, it's an interesting world we live in, and I keep coming back to my long passed away great grandmother. Who used to say, "You ain't dead yet," and it didn't matter whether you were going through good times or whether you were going through bad times. The whole point was that you could change it
right, right.
because you ain't dead yet. It's all over when you're dead. Bang, that's it. Wrap it
Good
up in a parcel.
grandparents.
And we're all good people after we're gone. Just listen to all the obituaries. So this is
Mm,
what we can do in the meantime. Is the challenge. Can we be good people? Can we make an effective difference in the world? And if there's something in the past that is stopping you from being effective and stopping you from being the person you want to be in the world today, then change it.
yeah,
Change it.
change your past, change your perspective. Let
So it
go of
can be
some of
done.
the non non-serving beliefs.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think we got to the end of this one again.
I hope so. No, it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one because you can go on forever on these things. But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's it. I think really we're looking at and if any people if listeners have any questions, well, drop us a line, send us a
yeah,
question. You know,
yeah.
hello at
We
Jack and John at Gmail, and we'll answer you. Be happy to
yeah,
do so, along with any subjects that you want to bring up or whatever. We'll get in and have a discussion around those. So
and yeah,
thank
we're
you,
looking
Jack.
forward. Yes, thank you, George.
We'll be back next week, right?
Yeah, we will be back.